it's the wrong time to be figuring out how to use your equipment. It'd be like buying your gun and never firing a round out of it and then trying to employ it in a situation where you needed it.
Hi everybody, I'm Tim Bulott and welcome to weaponsacademy.com. This is episode 5 of Ammo Shortage as we continue to navigate our way through this crisis, the COVID-19 crisis of 2020. Okay, at this time things are pretty much the same, not much changing since last week. We're still in a shelter in place. We're still seeing food lines and shortages of some things. Other things are plentiful, just depends on what time and when and where that you go. Ammo is still scarce, although it is coming up a little bit. Prices are coming down a little bit. We're not where we were before this started, but we're getting closer, and that still causes us to limit how much actual range time that we spend. And that brings us to today's session, okay? Because not all tactical training and range time is about live fire. As a matter of fact, you can conduct tactical training without firing a shot, depending on what topic you pick, okay? So today we've got with us Terry Green, Senior Chief Green, retired Navy corpsman, and he conducts our Tac Med classes out at Weapons Academy. He's going to go over a session which we've entitled Tac Med Essentials. The equipment that you need, some training thoughts and ideas that you need, and some basic mindset and philosophy when it comes down to Tac Med training. So you don't have to do anything on this one. Just sit back, watch, soak it up, and enjoy. Let's make a little bit of mental training and mental preparation today. Let's get into it. So it's production day here at Weapons Academy, and we've been getting set for another video shoot. And once again, you can see we're dealing with another springtime storm here. So it's actually kind of nice today. This is Easter weekend, and it's in the 50s out here. It feels really, really good. But anyway, we're going to be shooting you some content here in a bit. Get you another episode or two of our ammo shortage series. Hopefully some good training tips for you guys out there. So anyway, just letting the rain pass, and we're going to get to work. We'll be back. Okay, so we're out on the range. We've got Terry Green with us today. Terry, we are in your wheelhouse today. What do you got for us?
Well, a lot of times, Tim, you like to talk about training without firing a shot. So we're going to do that today. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the things that you'll most likely use in your day-to-day life. You know, it's medical training, it's trauma training. We're not going to go massively in depth, but we're going to talk about some of the gear that you should have, and we're going to talk about some of the training analogs that you can use to put tourniquets on, to do wound packing, so that you can practice these things at home. It'll give you a nice overview and give you some information for when you do come out and take one of our emergency care under fire classes, a Tac Med class, or one of the trauma classes.
Well, I'm excited because I get to sit back and just soak it all up this time. Tac Med training with Terry Green coming right up.
All right, so there's some great information out there that you can find on the internet, that you can find at home for training, again, without firing a shot. Probably the most important skill set that you'll have is having some kind of trauma medicine skills. Our first responders, the police, very rarely do they pull their weapon and fire it in an engagement. You're much more likely to come up on a bus wreck, car wreck. For God's sakes, we live in Texas. You know, the odds of a tornado or a thunderstorm or a single car accident on the road, they're significant. So getting that mindset to be prepared and have the right equipment to treat a trauma patient as you find them while you wait for those first responders to get on the scene is kind of critical. Again, there's lots of video out there. You can go to deployedmedicine.com, which is all the background information for tactical combat casualty care. It's very much applicable in any kind of trauma, on the roadside, schools, wherever. You can go to TECC, and it's c-tecc.org, which is Tactical Emergency Casualty Care. That's the standard on the civilian side that's used for police, firefighters, first responders. The videos are there. Study them. Do the reading. But don't take that as a substitute for hands-on training. It's just like dry firing your pistol. You need to have hands-on. You need to go through the motions. You need to build that muscle memory. There's plenty of video out there that you can find on the internet, on YouTube, that shows, police officers, civilians, even firefighters pulling a tourniquet out and trying to use it for the first time in their life when they have a casualty in front of them. It's the wrong time to be figuring out how to use your equipment. It'd be like buying your gun and never firing a round out of it and then trying to employ it in a situation where you needed it. It's too little too late. So let's look first at just kind of basic kit. There's a million videos out there on this. This is not any kind of a recommendation for a specific company. It's mostly a recommendation for the style of equipment you need to be carrying with you. It doesn't take up much space, but you can do a ton of work out of a small amount of equipment. Kind of assembled here to my side, I've got some North American Rescue products. Their Gen 7 cat tourniquet. It's an effective tourniquet. There are hundreds of tourniquets that can be found on Amazon. Most of them I would stay away from. If you go to deployedmedicine.com, you'll find that the Council of Tactical Combat Casualty Care has gone through and tested and recommended medical equipment that they know works. It's evidence-based medicine. It's not something that somebody made up and is selling. So they evaluate everybody's tourniquets. A good tourniquet, whether it's from North American Rescue, soft T, wide, it's going to run you around $30. You can buy tourniquet knockoffs for 19 bucks, 18 bucks, 15 bucks, but they break. They're ineffective. They don't work. My life and your life are worth more than 30 bucks. So it's simple, doesn't take up much space. We talk about wound packing, in addition to tourniquet use. Getting combat gauze, which has a hemostatic agent in it, which you can pack wounds, and it helps cut down on the amount of time that you have to put pressure on a wound. You go from about 10 minutes of direct pressure, and when I say direct pressure, I'm not talking just holding your hand over it. I'm talking 5 to 8 pounds of continuous pressure for 10 minutes with gauze, t-shirts, something that doesn't have a hemostatic agent in it. To something like combat gauze, Kaido gauze, any of those, your time is cut down to about 3 minutes. They're effective, they work, they don't take up much space. Having some kind of a battle dressing that you can then go over the top of that with. Doesn't take up much space. Chest seals. There are several different brands of chest seals out there. Hyphen, Bolin chest seals. They're all good. Again, verify that they're on the recommended list by Council of TCCC, TECC. They're highly effective. It's a simple solution to injuries that are, inside the box, from shoulder to belt line, front and back. It doesn't take a lot of equipment to make a massive difference on traumatic injury. If you can control the bleed, control the airway, and control respirations by sealing the box, you've probably increased their chances of survival from traumatic injury at least 25 to 40%. You're buying the time to get them to the ER so that the ER can pick up the slack from there and keep them alive. You just got to give them something to work with. So that all being said, again, there are tons of videos out there on kit. There's tons of them. Make sure that the equipment that you use is recommended by the Council of TCCC. It's been vetted, it's been verified. They don't mandate certain equipment, they just test it. If it passes their testing, they recommend it. So we'll kind of leave it at that. Stay away from the fluff and the stuff that's not on their recommended list. you're taking a chance. So with that being said, you've got all this great gear. Now I need to train. All right, so we've looked at our kit. We need to train. We don't want to open our kit up the first time when we have an emergency. On the other hand, we don't want to use our tourniquets and our equipment out of our kit to train with. So you need to dedicate training equipment. That way it's not new when an emergency happens. It's building that muscle memory. It's training without firing a shot. You're back to that. North American Rescue makes training tourniquets. They're just like the real one. They're just colored differently and they're set up to train with. They make combat gauze that does not have the hemostatic agent in it. So you get to go through the motions of working with combat gauze. It's going to have a similar feel. You can take any Z-fold gauze. This is inexpensive. You can use it to pack wounds with when you train. Same thing with, dressings. You can buy training dressings. That way you can go through all the motions, build the muscle memory, build the skill set, so that way you smooth out the approach to your casualty, the approach to your patient, the use of the gear. You know what it's like to open it up and actually employ it. That way you're not trying to figure it out when you're stressed and somebody's laying there screaming, hollering, bleeding, and you're on the clock. So think about what you're doing. Think about taking that same training approach to trauma that you do to firearms use. You're much more likely to use medical skills in your day-to-day life. Much more likely, particularly trauma skills. Being prepared, being a good Boy Scout, if you will, helps you and helps somebody that you respond to. So that kind of gives you a quick overview of that. What we'll talk about next is some analogs that you can use for training. You can obviously put tourniquets on yourself. You should, so that way you get a feel for it. You can put tourniquets on, a partner, especially your training tourniquets, so that you get a feel for what it's like putting it on somebody else. But it's hard to do wound packing, without an analog, without spending money on buying meat. So I've got a couple of tips and some tricks that you can do that are low cost. We'll give you some analogs to show you what it's like and to let you practice that skill set for wound packing and tourniquet placement. When we talk about analogs that we can use for wound packing and tourniquets, really the best equipment out there gives you feedback, but that costs thousands of dollars, or you're going to spend your time going to training at places that can provide that. So at home, on a budget, because we're all on a budget, there are some simple things that you can do to kind of create that training analog. So a couple of the things that I've got here, and this is very simple and it's very easy to use. The great part up here is it's a physical therapy pad, roller pad. So what I do is I get about a 3-foot one, cut it in half, and I'm creating basically a thigh. I drill it out and run some PVC down it, kind of becomes a bone, if you will. Then I've attached it to landscape timber, just to kind of give it some weight, spread it out a little bit, and then I've just kind of padded it up so I'm not thumping around on the landscape timber and beating myself with it. But then I can create, once I've attached it all, I can then create the wounds, whether it's a long laceration, and if you can kind of see the depth that I can get in there, all the way down with a large wound cavity, or if I set that one aside, I've got a second one here that has more of a puncture style, gunshot wound, puncture style wound. Same thing, and I can follow that wound track all the way down and in. Well, I can come back with these and I can put tourniquets on them. And it gives me a good analog for placing a tourniquet on a lower extremity or an upper extremity. And I'm not leaving bruises all over myself, my spouse, my buddy, whatever. So it gets me there. If I want to go and do wound packing, you know, and I've got my training gauze, and this is some training combat gauze, I can do the same thing. When I'm doing wound packing, I can get all the way down in to that wound and start doing my pack, and it lets me work through that analog, gives me resistance, similar, not the same, similar to what I can get with tissue. The other thing that I'll do is, since I don't want to make a mess, I'll use Surgilube or some kind of a lubricating jelly. They're water soluble, they're slick, so they have a similar feel to blood, and it lets you kind of track down through the wound. You can then pack your wound, do your pressure, come back and put your pressure dressing over it. It becomes a good, simple, inexpensive training analog. Again, you can do this at home. So it's not the catch-all end-all, but it lets you practice the skill set. It lets you practice the skill set in real time, so that you start learning that things don't just magically happen. Kind of like your TAC reloads, moving off target, moving to target. None of that stuff happens in a vacuum. Everything takes time. Well, this gives you a better sense of that. It gives you a better sense of what you're going to face working through the problem. And that's really what it's all about. It's developing that mindset that you can work through the problem. So this will it'll get you started. It's not a substitute for good hands-on training, but it lets you fill the gap right now while you're quarantined. It lets you do hands-on at home. Get out after that and get training. You know, get with somebody that knows what they're doing. That way they can reinforce good habits. And it kind of gets you down the road to where you need to be.
So there you've heard it from Senior Chief Green himself. There's not much more to say after a session like that, except it's time to get into it now. So Tac Med is one of those topics that's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and just like all of the other tactics and training, you need to keep on top of it. All of these situations that we're seeing nowadays, be it an active shooter or just some kind of a emergency like what we're in right now, medical training is a necessity. It's a requirement, in my opinion. All of these active shooters have had victims that could have been saved had there been tourniquets and people that know how to rapidly apply those tourniquets after the shooter's been put down, okay? And that's part of what Terry's trying to come at with this, okay, is having this knowledge and then having the ability to execute this knowledge in a short amount of time saves lives. So I'm hoping to see more of you in our emergency care under fire. Yes, you. I'm talking to you, okay? Next time y'all see that class on our calendar, come out and take the training, okay? Your tactical training is not complete without the medical side of it. Emergency care under fire, come take that course, okay? So, having said that, if you're not training, you ought to be. If you're not training at Weapons Academy, come check us out and see what we're doing. Y'all stay safe out there, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the next episode.